The radio in the visitor center never worked right. So when it crackled to life at 6:40 that morning, and a voice I didn't recognize told me to close every trail on the mountain, my first instinct was that someone was playing a joke. Then the voice said it again, slower, and I heard it start to shake. Close them all. Vehicle gates, foot access, the boardwalk, the loop, everything. Do not let anyone pass the parking lot. Do you copy, Founders Grove? My name is Halvard Renner. People call me Hal. I was 51 years old that autumn. 16 seasons into a job most people think is about pointing tourists toward the tallest tree and reminding them not to feed the elk. I ran the interpretive station at the north end of a state Redwoods park. You've probably driven past on the coast highway without slowing down. Fog most mornings. Trees so old they were already ancient when the first sawmills came. And a phone line that dropped every time it rained. That morning, it wasn't raining. The sky was the color of wet concrete, and the parking lot was empty except for my truck and a camper van that had been there overnight. I keyed the mic and asked the voice to repeat the order and identify themselves. There was a pause long enough that I thought I'd lost them. District, Emergency Operations. Just do it, Hal. Please. They knew my name. That's the detail that put the cold in me. Whoever it was on the other end wasn't reading a script. They knew who they were talking to, and they said please like a man who already knew it wouldn't be enough. Before I go further, I want to say thank you to everyone who keeps coming back to sit with these stories. And welcome if this is your first time here. If quiet, grounded survival horror is the kind of thing you like, subscribe and leave a comment because it genuinely helps this channel keep going. Now, let me get back to that morning, because within the hour, the fog stopped being weather and started being a place things could hide. I want to be honest about what I did first because it wasn't heroic. I finished my coffee. 16 Seasons teaches you that panic on a two-way radio usually means a bear got into a cooler or somebody's grandmother twisted an ankle on the cathedral loop. So I set the mug down, and I walked out to the gate at the mouth of the vehicle road. And I swung the steel arm across and dropped the pin. And I hung the sign that says, "Trail closed due to hazardous conditions." Routine. I'd done it 100 times for floods and downed limbs. The van's side door opened while I was still holding the sign. A man climbed out, maybe 40, gray at the temples, wearing the kind of technical jacket that costs more than my monthly truck payment. Behind him, a woman was still asleep in the back, or pretending to be. He walked toward me with the easy confidence of a person who has never in his life been told no by someone in a uniform. And he said, "Hey, is the boardwalk open? We drove up from the bay. We've got a permit." "Trails are closed this morning," I said. "Sorry, weather advisory." He looked up at the flat gray sky. There was no weather to advise about, and we both knew it. Closed for what? That was the second time in 10 minutes someone asked me a question I couldn't answer. I told him I'd know more in a few minutes, that he should keep the van at the far end of the lot. And I walked back inside to the radio and keyed it again and asked District what hazard I was supposed to be reporting to the public. The voice came back different, not the same person. A woman now, older, and she wasn't shaking. She was flat in the way people get when they've decided that steadiness is the only thing they have left to give. "Renner, listen carefully. There's an event on the south side of the range. We don't have a name for it yet. What we know is that people who go into the deep timber are not coming back out the same, and some of them are not coming back out at all. We need the trails empty, and we need them empty now. Can you account for everyone who was on the mountain overnight?" I stood there in the little office with its topographic map, and its rack of laminated bird guides. And I felt the floor of my ordinary life tilt. Because no, I could not account for everyone. There were 4 backcountry permits logged for the previous night. 4 parties still somewhere up in the old growth, under a canopy so thick that in places it never got fully light even at noon. "I've got backcountry campers out there," I said. 4 permits, maybe 9, 10 people total. The silence on the other end lasted so long, I checked to see if the radio had died. "Then you have a decision to make," she said finally. "We can't send anyone up, not right now. The road on the south end is compromised. If those people come down on their own, you do not open that gate until we clear it. Do you understand me? No matter what they say, no matter what they look like." I understood the words. I did not yet understand what she was telling me to be ready to see. The park where I worked is not one place. That's the thing people miss when they drive through. From the parking lot, it looks like a grove, and a gift shop, and a bathroom that smells like cedar and disinfectant. But the ground behind that grove runs back for miles, folding up into ridges and dropping into canyons where creeks cut down to the sea. The trees are the tallest living things on the planet, and their bases are wide enough to park a car inside a burned-out hollow. And under them the world is dim and soft and quiet in a way that swallows sound. You can stand 30 feet from another person in that understory and not know they're there. I'd spent 16 years learning the moods of that place, and I thought I knew it. I want to describe the visitor center itself, because it becomes the whole world of this story, so you need to see it. It's a single-story building of dark-stained timber, low and long, built in the 60s to look like it grew out of the ground. 2 rooms in front for exhibits, a counter with a cash register nobody uses anymore, and a back office with the radio, the phone, a first aid cabinet, a small generator hookup, and a steel door to a storage room where we keep everything a park runs on. Rope, flares, spare batteries, a locked cabinet with the drugs the rangers are allowed to carry for emergencies, epinephrine and the like. Water, and a wall-mounted emergency kit that, in a real crisis, is supposed to keep a skeleton crew alive and in contact for 72 hours. I was the skeleton crew. It was the shoulder season. There was supposed to be a second staffer, a seasonal interpreter named Cormac Deschler. But Cormac had radioed in the night before to say his car wouldn't start and he'd be late. Cormac was 26, sharp, ambitious, one of those young people who treats a seasonal park job like a rung on a ladder to somewhere better. I liked him. I want that on the record, because of what comes later. I liked him. I got off the radio with District, and I did the count again on paper, the way my father taught me to do anything that mattered. 4 permits. The first was a solo hiker, a birder named Present, out for the spotted owls. The second was a family of 3, parents and a teenage kid, who'd asked more questions about bears than any family I'd ever checked in. The third was a pair of graduate students from the university, doing something with soil samples that they'd explained to me in more detail than I needed. And the fourth was a group of 4 men on what their permit called a fitness retreat, which usually meant they'd packed too much whiskey and not enough water. 9 people. Maybe 10 if the family's kid had brought a friend I hadn't logged. 9 people under those trees, and a woman on the radio telling me that people who went into the deep timber were not coming back the same. I walked back out to the lot to tell the man from the van that he needed to leave, that the whole park was closing, that this was not a weathered day. He wasn't at his van. The side door hung open, and his wife or girlfriend was sitting up now, blinking, asking me where he'd gone. He'd walked around the gate. Of course he had. Men like that always think the rope is for other people. I could see his footprints in the damp gravel where the vehicle road turned into the trailhead. headed up toward the boardwalk, toward the deep timber, toward the exact place the woman on the radio had told me to keep everyone out of. And the fog had come down off the ridge in the 10 minutes I'd been inside, thick as wet wool, so that the trees 50 yards up the trail were already just suggestions of trees. I stood at the gate with the closed sign swinging on its chain, and I made the first bad decision of that day, though I didn't know yet how many there would be. I went in after him. I told the woman in the van to stay in her vehicle, lock the doors, and if I wasn't back in an hour to drive down the mountain and not stop until she had cell signal, and to tell them the trails were closed. She didn't argue. She'd caught the tone in my voice, the one I hadn't managed to keep out of it. I grabbed the radio handset from the office, the portable, and clipped it to my belt. And I took a headlamp because the understory eats light. And I stepped over the rope I had just put up. The boardwalk starts about a quarter mile in, a raised wooden path that protects the shallow redwood roots from 10,000 pairs of feet a season. My boots knew the sound of it, the specific hollow knock of each plank. I called his name, though I didn't know his name, so I just called, "Hey, van guy, the park's closed. You need to turn around." The fog ate the sound. That's the only way I can describe it. Normally, your voice carries under those trees, bounces a little off the big trunks. That morning, it went out of my mouth and simply stopped 10 feet away, like it had hit a wall of cotton. I found his jacket first. The expensive gray technical jacket, hanging off the boardwalk rail about half a mile up, where the path curves around the base of a tree they call the grandmother. A redwood so old, it was a sapling when Rome was still standing. His jacket was there, and it was wet, and the zipper was still done up to the collar the way you'd never leave a jacket you took off yourself. It was as if he'd walked right out of it. I called again. Nothing. And then, from up the slope where the boardwalk ended and the dirt trail climbed into the true old growth, I heard a sound I had heard 10,000 times in that park and had never once been afraid of. I heard a woodpecker. The hard, dry, rapid knock of a pileated woodpecker working a dead trunk. Rat-a-tat-tat. Pause. Rat-a-tat-tat. Except it was wrong. The rhythm was wrong. Too even. Too patient. And it was coming from a live tree, a redwood. And pileated woodpeckers don't work living redwoods because there's nothing in the bark for them. I stood on the boardwalk with the van man's empty jacket in my hand, and I listened to something knocking on a tree that had nothing inside it worth knocking for. And every 16 years of knowing, that forest told me the same thing at once. That was not a bird. I did not go up the dirt trail. I want to be clear about that, because I've replayed it 1,000 times, and it's the one early choice I don't regret. I put the jacket back on the rail, exactly where I'd found it. Some animal instinct telling me not to take anything from that place. And I walked backward down the boardwalk for the first 30 feet, watching the fog, before I let myself turn around and move fast. The knocking followed me. Not the sound getting louder, which would have meant something chasing me. Worse. The sound stayed exactly the same distance behind me the entire way down, matching my pace, patient, like whatever it was had all the time in the world, and simply wanted to know where the boardwalk led. It led to the parking lot, to the visitor center, to the woman in the van and the radio, and me. I broke into a run for the last quarter mile, and I did not stop until I was through the front door of the center with my back against it, breathing like I'd run the whole mountain. The van was gone. Good, I thought. She'd listened. She'd driven down. Then I looked closer at the empty gravel and saw that the van hadn't driven down the road at all. The tire tracks turned the wrong way, past the gate I'd closed, up the maintenance spur that leads to the water tanks and dead ends against the ridge. She hadn't fled. She'd gone looking for him. I got on the radio to District and told them what I'd heard and what I'd found. The jacket, the wrong rhythm knocking, the missing woman. There was a long pause, and then the flat woman's voice came back, and I'll never forget exactly how she put it. Renner, I need you to do something, and I need you to not ask me why. Get into your storage room, count your supplies, water, batteries, the drug cabinet, the 72-hour kit. Write it all down. Then I need you to make sure that door locks from the inside, and I need you to be ready to be there for longer than 3 days. Longer than 3 days, I repeated. You said the 72-hour kit. I know what I said. That was the moment the ordinary version of the day died for good. Because a 72-hour kit is called that for a reason. It's the number the agency planned around. 3 days, and then help comes. She was telling me, in the gentlest way a bureaucracy knows how, that help was not coming in 3 days, maybe not in 3 weeks, that the number on the box was now just a number on a box. I went into the storage room, and I turned on the light, and I started counting. And that count is where the real story begins, because the numbers didn't add up. Not because I'd miscounted, because someone had gotten there first. Let me tell you what a fully stocked emergency store looks like in a state park visitor center, because the difference between what should have been there and what was there is the whole engine of what happened next. There's supposed to be a case of water, 24-gallon jugs, rotated on a schedule so nothing sits long enough to grow anything. There's a plastic footlocker of dry rations, the kind of dense caloric bricks that taste like sweetened sawdust and keep a person going. There's a battery locker. There's a red steel cabinet, padlocked, with the medical supplies a wilderness first responder is licensed to use. And inside that cabinet, on the top shelf, 3 auto-injectors of epinephrine for anaphylaxis, a supply of a powerful clotting agent for bad bleeds, and a small locked drawer within the cabinet holding the controlled medications, morphine among them, that were required by law to inventory every single week and log by hand. I knew what should be there because I'd logged it myself the previous Friday. My own handwriting was on the sheet taped to the inside of the cabinet door. The water was there. The batteries were there, mostly. The rations were there. The red cabinet was unlocked. And it was not empty, but it was wrong. The clotting agent was gone. 2 of the 3 epinephrine injectors were gone. And the small drawer, the one for the controlled drugs, the one that by law I was the only person on that mountain with a key to, was open. And the morphine was gone. And in its place, sitting square in the middle of the empty drawer where I couldn't possibly miss it, was a folded piece of paper. I didn't touch it at first. I stood there in the storage room, and I did the thing you do when your mind can't accept what your eyes are reporting, which is to check the facts again from the top. My key, the only key, on the ring on my belt where it always was. The lock, not broken, not forced, opened with a key. And there was only one other key to that cabinet in existence, held at the district office 30 miles down the mountain, in a lockbox, for exactly the kind of emergency where I might be dead and someone needed the drugs. Except District hadn't sent anyone up. The road was compromised. The woman on the radio had told me nobody could come. I picked up the paper and unfolded it. And I recognized the handwriting before I finished the first line, because I'd graded that handwriting on incident reports all season. It was Cormac's, my seasonal interpreter, the kid whose car wouldn't start. The note said, "Hal, I'm sorry. If you're reading this, you're still up there, which means you're stronger than me, and I hate that you'll know. I took what I could carry. Ilsa is pregnant. I couldn't be up here when it comes. Don't try the district road. It's not compromised. They closed it on purpose, and they're not opening it. There's one way down that still works, and I'm taking it. I locked the south gate behind me. I had to. If I leave it open, they follow the road right to the coast. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. See. I read it 4 times. And with each read, a different piece of my morning rearranged itself into something colder. Cormac's car hadn't broken down. He'd never intended to come to work. He'd come up in the night, before my shift, while the mountain was still just a mountain and district hadn't yet said the word event on the radio. He'd used the district lockbox key, which meant either he'd had help from someone below or he'd taken it long before that morning planning. He'd cleaned out the medical cabinet of exactly the things a person would want if they were going somewhere with no doctors and a pregnant partner. The clotting agent, the epinephrine, the morphine, not a thief grabbing at random, a frightened man packing for a future with no hospitals in it. And he'd locked the south gate. I need you to understand what that meant, because it's the whole ticking clock of this story. And it took me a few minutes standing in that storage room to assemble it. The park has 2 vehicle roads. The North Road, my road, which goes down to the coast highway and which district said not to use, because the district office would turn me back or worse. And the South Road, which loops around the back of the range and comes out miles from anywhere, on a fire road that eventually meets pavement in the next county. The South Road was the one district had called compromised, the one the woman said not to use. But Cormac's note said district had lied, that the South Road wasn't compromised at all, that they'd closed it deliberately to contain whatever was up here, and that it was the only way down that still worked. Cormac had gone down the South Road, and he'd locked the gate behind him, and the key to that gate's padlock, the physical brass key, lived on one ring in one place, the storage room I was standing in. I looked at the pegboard by the door where the vehicle and gate keys hang on labeled hooks. The south gate key was gone. He hadn't just locked the gate. He'd taken the key. He'd left me the water, left me the rations, left me the note. And he'd taken the one thing that would let me follow him out the only road that worked. If Cormac was right, and I had no reason yet to think he was lying about that part, then he had sealed me on a mountain where the birds knocked wrong and men walked out of their own jackets, and he'd done it so that whatever was up here couldn't follow him down. Which meant he'd made a calculation. Him and Ilsa and the thing coming weighed against me. And I'd lost the math. I sat down on the footlocker of rations, and I let myself feel it for exactly as long as I could afford to, which wasn't long, because the radio in the office had started to hiss. I'd like to ask you something here, before this goes any further, because I've thought about it for a long time, and I still don't know the answer. If you were Cormac, if you had someone you loved and something coming and only enough medicine for one household, would you have taken the key too? Not the drugs, the key, the thing that traps another man to save yourself the risk. Tell me honestly in the comments, because I've never been able to decide whether what he did was cowardice or arithmetic. I went to the radio. The hiss resolved into the flat woman's voice, and she was in the middle of a sentence, repeating something, the way you do when you've been calling, and nobody's answered. Count, Renner, I need that count. Renner, come back. I keyed the mic. I have your count, I said. But I have a bigger problem. My seasonal Cormac Deschler was up here last night. He took the controlled meds and the clotting agent and 2 epi. And he took the south gate key, and he locked the south gate behind him. He left a note. He says the South Road isn't compromised. He says you closed it on purpose. The The silence that came back was a different kind of silence than before. The earlier silences had been the sound of someone deciding how much to tell me. This one was the sound of someone deciding whether to keep lying. "Renner," she said finally, "the south road being closed is above my level. I don't set containment lines. But I'll tell you what I know is true, and you can do with it what you want. Nobody is coming up the north road to get you. And I have not been told that anyone is coming to open the south road either. If your man is telling the truth, then he's on the last way down. And if he locked it behind him, then you're going to have to find another way, because I can't send you a key, and I can't send you a helicopter. And I can't, God help me, send you so much as a phone number that will do you any good." "Then what am I supposed to do?" I said. It wasn't really a question. It came out of me like the last air out of a tire. "You're supposed to stay alive," she said, "and stay off the trails and keep the radio on, because you and I are the only two people talking on this frequency right now. And I would like that to remain true tomorrow. I want to tell you about Cormac, so that you understand this wasn't a stranger. I hired him. I recommended him. The district does the actual hiring, but they take the site supervisor's word, and I gave my word for him. He'd shown up in the spring green as grass, a forestry degree, and no field sense. The kind of young man who could name every tree in Latin and couldn't read the weather off the sky. But he learned. That's what I liked about him. You'd tell him a thing once, and he'd have it. He never made the same mistake twice. And over a season that turns into trust, the specific kind of trust you build with a person you'd have to depend on if something went wrong in a place with no cell signal and no backup. I had, more than once that summer, told Cormac things I'd do in an emergency. Walked him through the storage room, shown him the 72-hour kit, explained the drug cabinet log. I'd taught him where everything was and why it mattered. I'd taught the man who robbed me exactly what to take. That's the part that sat in my chest like a swallowed stone. Not the drugs. Drugs can be replaced. It was that every piece of his betrayal ran on knowledge I'd handed him myself, patiently, over months, believing I was building a colleague. He hadn't picked a lock. He'd used a key I'd shown him how to find. He hadn't guessed what to steal. He'd taken the exact list I'd recited to him on a slow August afternoon while we reorganized the medical cabinet together, and I'd said, offhand, half joking, "If it ever really goes bad up here, this is the shelf that keeps you alive." I remember he'd nodded and written nothing down. I'd thought at the time it meant he already knew it cold. Now I understood it meant he'd decided not to leave evidence. The mention of Ilsa in the note stopped me too. I'd met Ilsa once, at the end of season staff barbecue the summer before. Quiet woman, worked at a plant nursery down in the valley, hands always a little green under the nails. She'd talked to me for 20 minutes about propagating manzanita, and I'd liked her immediately. If she was pregnant now, in the fall, then she'd have been early on. First trimester, the fragile part. When the books tell you anything can go wrong, and a doctor's number in your phone is the difference between a scare and a tragedy. Cormac wasn't lying about being scared. A man doesn't rob his mentor and trap him on a mountain over a lie he could just tell. He does it because the fear is real, and it's bigger than his conscience. That didn't make it right, but it made it a human thing instead of a monstrous one, and somehow that was worse. Because you can't hate a human thing cleanly. It gets into you. I spent the next hour doing the only useful thing I could think of, which was making the visitor center defensible and figuring out exactly how much time I actually had. The woman's phrase kept circling in my head. The perimeter. She'd never used the word, but Cormac's note had, in its way. If I leave the gate open, they follow the road right to the coast. There was a containment line somewhere on this mountain, drawn by people below me who decided that whatever was in the deep timber had to stay in the deep timber. And the two roads were the two seams in that line. And one seam was locked behind me, and one seam was watched from below by people the woman on the radio wouldn't quite name. And containment lines, I knew from every wildfire that had ever threatened that park, are not permanent. They're held with resources. Someone has to be at the South Road turnback. Someone has to be watching the North Road. The moment the people below decided the mountain was a lost cause, or the moment they simply ran out of bodies to hold the line, the perimeter would stop being a wall and start being a memory. And then it wouldn't matter which gate was locked, because the thing that knocked wrong on living trees would come down whichever road it pleased. And I'd be sitting in a timber building with a good lock and no way out. I did the math on the radio batteries. The portable handset ran off rechargeables, and I had 6 spares, and the center's radio ran off the building power, which ran off the grid until the grid failed, and then off a generator that had maybe 40 hours of fuel in the tank. Call it 2 days of reliable communication with a flat woman's voice, which was, at that point, the only human contact I had left in the world. I did the math on water. 24 gallons for one man is a long time. Weeks. Water wasn't going to be what killed me. I did the math on the door. The storage room steel door did lock from the inside. A deadbolt Cormac himself had helped me install in July, when a bear got into the center one night. I'd thanked him for his help. We'd gotten pizza after. I stood there looking at the deadbolt he'd sunk into the frame, and I understood that when I locked myself in against whatever was coming, I'd be locking a door built by the same hands that had trapped me. The forest went quiet in the early afternoon. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind. The kind where the small birds that are always there, the wrens and the juncos scratching in the duff, all stop at once, and the silence has a shape to it. A direction, like everything alive, has agreed on which way the danger is. The knocking started again around 3. It was closer this time, down off the ridge, somewhere between the boardwalk and the parking lot. Rat-a-tat-tat, patient, even. And now there was a second one, answering off to the west, up the maintenance spur where the van had gone. 2 of them, knocking back and forth across the fog like they were mapping the empty space between them. And I was the empty space. I keyed the radio and told the woman I could hear 2 of them now. 2 of what? She said. And I realized districts still didn't have a real description. That everything they knew was coming from people like me, scattered across the range at their little stations, reporting sounds into the dark. I don't know what they are, I said. But they've learned to sound like the forest. They knock like woodpeckers. They're using the fog. And they're between me and the only open road. And the open road is locked. And I gave the key away without knowing it. I heard my own voice crack on that last part. I trained the man who took it. I taught him where everything was. This is my fault as much as his. It is not your fault, she said. And for the first time there was something under the flatness, something almost fierce. A man who plans to rob you doesn't do it because you were trusting. He does it because he'd already decided you were expendable. Don't you dare carry that for him. I've thought about those words more than almost anything else anyone said to me that whole day. He'd already decided you were expendable. She was right. And it didn't help at all, because the thing about being decided against by someone you trusted is that the decision doesn't feel like it came from them. It feels like it revealed something true about you that you hadn't known. That you were, in the ledger of a scared young man, a name in the column you cross out. I made a decision then. Sitting in that office with 2 wrong woodpeckers knocking closer in the fog. I decided I was not going to be the name in the crossed-out column. Cormac had taken the key to the one road that worked. Fine. Then I was going to find the second road that shouldn't work. Because a man who's worked a mountain 16 years knows things that aren't on the map. And I knew there was a third way off that ridge, an old one, a bad one. And I'd have to decide whether being expendable to Cormac was worse than the thing that road would cost me. But first, I had to survive the night. And the night is where it changed from a story about a locked gate into a story about what those things actually were, and about the one of them that came to the door and knocked. And I understood, with a horror I still can't fully put into words, that it wasn't imitating a bird anymore. It was imitating a knock, a human knock. 3 even raps on wood, the way you knock on a door when you want to be let in. Here's what I did as the light started to go, and I'll walk you through it the way I did it in my head, because the order mattered, and any mistake would have been the last one. I moved everything I couldn't afford to lose into the storage room. The portable radio and its spare batteries. Water, enough for a week, though I didn't plan to be in there a week. The rations. The one epinephrine injector Cormac had left, though I had no allergy, because in a place with no doctors, you don't throw away medicine you don't understand yet. A flashlight, a headlamp, a hatchet from the fire cabinet, and the old growth of things a park keeps, rope and duct tape and a first aid kit stripped of its best parts. I left the office radio on and turned up, tuned to district, so that even from inside the storage room, I could hear the flat woman if she called. I ran an extension of the antenna wire under the storage room door and taped it down so the signal would still reach me with the door shut. Cormac had taught me nothing about radios. That knowledge was mine, from a life before the park. And I clung to it a little, the way you cling to the parts of yourself that no one else has touched. And then I made a mistake. A small one, or so I thought. I went back out to the front room one last time to lock the main door and lower the blinds, because the front of the visitor center is mostly glass. Big windows looking out at the grove so tourists can watch the light change in the trees. And I did not want anything watching me back through them in the dark. The parking lot outside those windows was full of fog, gone gold now, with the last of the daylight in it. And standing at the edge of the lot, at the mouth of the boardwalk trail, was a person. For one whole heartbeat, I was flooded with relief, because a person meant help. A person meant I wasn't the last one. A person meant the world hadn't ended after all. It was the man from the van. The gray jacket, except he wasn't wearing the gray jacket. I'd left that up on the boardwalk rail. So it was just a man in a shirt, standing very still at the edge of the fog, facing the windows, facing me. And I raised my hand to wave him in, and I actually took a step toward the door to unlock it. And then some older animal part of me, the part that had made me walk backward down the boardwalk that morning, put its hand flat against my chest and said no. Because he wasn't standing the way people stand. His weight was wrong. His head was tipped slightly too far to one side, the way you tip your head to listen. And he held it there, tipped, not moving, for far too long. And his arms hung at his sides with the hands turned outward, palms forward, the way hands hang when the person has stopped telling them what to do. I lowered my own hand slowly. I stepped back from the door, and across the 50 feet of foggy gravel in the last gold light. The man's head tipped the other way, the same too far tilt to the opposite side, mirroring me, matching me, the way the knocking had matched my pace on the boardwalk. Then he lifted one outward-turned hand, and he knocked on the air. 3 times, on nothing, rap, rap, rap. And I heard it, clear as anything, 3 even knocks with no door for them to land on. and his mouth opened, and out of it came the flat woman's voice from my own office radio, tinny and perfect, saying, "Renner, I need that count." I have never in my life moved the way I moved then. I was through the office and into the storage room, and I had the steel door shut and the deadbolt thrown before my mind had finished understanding what my body had already decided. I stood in the dark, with my back against the cold steel, and my heart going like the wrong woodpecker, and I listened to the visitor center on the other side of the door. I listened to it learn the building. That's the only way I can describe the sounds that came over the next hour. It got in. I don't know how. The front door was locked, but the sound of glass didn't break, so it didn't come through the windows. It just, at some point, was inside. And once it was inside, it went through the visitor center the way a curious child goes through a house, except with none of a child's noise. I heard the little brass bell on the front counter, the one for calling a ranger, give a single soft ding, as if something had touched it to learn what it did. I heard the cash register drawer roll open on its track. I heard once the specific squeak of my own office chair turning. And I thought about the shape of a thing sitting down in my chair in the dark, tipping its head, listening. And then it found the office radio, still tuned to district, still turned up. And it went quiet. And it listened to it, the way I'd been listening to it all day. And after a while, it began to answer it. The flat woman's voice would come across the office radio, real 30 miles down the mountain, saying, "Renner, come back. Are you secure?" And a beat later, on the other side of my steel door, the same words would come again in the same voice, out of a mouth that had learned it that afternoon in the parking lot. "Renner, come back. Are you secure?" Not to me, to the radio. It was talking to the radio, trying the sound out. And the radio, being a radio, said nothing back. And I sat in the dark and understood that these things were not hunting with their eyes or their noses. They were hunting with sound. They were learning us one noise at a time. The knock, the bell, the voice. And they were trying to find the sound that a door makes when a scared man on the other side of it decides to open up. I turned my portable radio's volume all the way down until I could only hear it by pressing it to my ear. And in the dark, cheek against cold steel, I whispered into it, so quiet it was barely breath. And 30 miles away, the flat woman heard me and had the wisdom to whisper back. And that is how we talked through the longest night of my life. Two people breathing at each other across a dying frequency, while the thing in my office practiced her voice. I want to ask you where you're listening from tonight, because I genuinely like to know how far this story has traveled. And because I've found that when the dark gets close, it helps to remember that somewhere there's a person hearing your voice who wishes you well. So tell me in the comments what part of the world you're in. It matters more than you'd think. Sometime deep in the night, the flat woman told me her name. She said it was Odalis. She said she was 63 years old and had worked emergency dispatch for the county for 31 years and had planned to retire in the spring and buy a small boat. She told me these things in a whisper, in the gaps between the thing in my office trying out sounds. And I understood she was telling me because she'd decided one of us should know the other as a person before the frequency died, in case it was the last human conversation either of us got to have. So I told her about my father teaching me to count things that mattered on paper. I told her about the manzanita and Ilsa's green fingernails. I told her that I'd trained the man who trapped me and that I couldn't stop tasting it at the back of my throat like a coin. And Odalis, in the dark, 30 miles down the mountain, said the thing that changed the whole shape of the night for me. She said, "Hal, the South Road, your man Cormac, he was right that we closed it on purpose. But he was wrong about why. We didn't close it to trap the things up there." She paused, and I heard her breathe, and I heard, faintly, my office chair turn again on the other side of my door. "We closed it because the things came up that road 3 days ago, from below. They didn't start in your deep timber, Hal. They came up out of the county to the south, and your mountain is where we decided to stop them, because it's the last high ground before the coast, and there's only one thing up there worth the whole world coming apart to protect." "What's up here?" I whispered. "What's worth it?" "You are," she said. "All of you. Everybody that they haven't gotten to yet. The mountain's not the trap, Hal. It's the wall. And your man drove down the one road that leads straight into where they came from, thinking he was escaping. And he took your key so nothing could follow him. But Hal..." Her whisper went very careful, the way you speak when you're about to hand someone a grief. "There's nothing to follow him into. The south is where it's worst. He didn't drive down the last way out. He drove down the throat of it. And he took your key. So if he's still alive down there, and he comes to his senses and turns around, he can get back through the south gate, and you can't stop him. And neither can we." I sat with that for a long time in the dark, long enough that Odalis said my name twice to make sure that things hadn't gotten me. Because here is what it meant, and it turned my whole day inside out. All day I had thought of Cormac as a coward who took the smart road and left me the dead one. I had built a whole cold hatred on the belief that he'd made the correct calculation, and I'd simply lost it. But if Odalis was right, then Cormac had made the exact wrong calculation. He'd looked at the 2 roads and picked the one that ran downhill into hell, because downhill and away felt like escape, because he was young and scared, and he'd never learned to read a mountain. The one thing I could never quite teach him. The sky reading, the ground sense, the knowing which direction the danger actually lives in. He'd taken my medicine and my key and my trust, and he'd used them to walk his pregnant partner directly into the source. And the key I'd been so bitter about. The South Gate key wasn't my ticket out. The South Gate was the wall's weak point. As long as it was locked and the key was in Cormac's pocket miles down a road into the worst of it, that gate was sealed against the thing coming up from the south. Cormac locking it behind him hadn't trapped me. It had, by pure blind accident, helped hold the wall. And now the only way that wall failed was if Cormac turned his van around, drove back up the throat of it, and unlocked the gate from the inside to get back to me, to the North Road, to the coast. The man who betrayed me was the only person alive who could unlock the door and let the whole thing through. And every hour that passed was an hour in which a frightened young man, having realized his mistake, might be turning his van around. That was the ticking clock, not the batteries, not the fuel, not the generator. It was Cormac's change of heart. The moment his fear of what was down the south road grew larger than his fear of coming back. He would drive up and unlock that gate with my key, and the wall would open, and it would open from the inside, and there would be no one there to stop him but me, on the wrong side of a locked steel door in the dark, with a hatchet and a whisper. I asked Odalis the question I already dreaded. How long do we have before the perimeter fails on its own if he doesn't come back? How long is District going to hold the line? The pause told me before her words did. They're pulling the south turnback at first light, she said. Not because they want to, because there's nobody left to hold it, and the county to the south is gone, And they need those people at the coast. After first light, Hal, the South Road is just a locked gate and a key in a dead man's pocket, or a live man's pocket, and whichever it is, decides everything. If your man is alive and comes back and unlocks it after first light, there's no one at the bottom to stop what follows him up. It comes up your mountain, and then it's just you and that gate and the North Road behind you. First light. I looked at my watch in the glow of the powered-down radio. I had maybe 5 hours until the sky over the fog went gray. And after that, the only thing standing between the worst of it and the open coast road was a locked gate that the one person who could open it was driving further from or closer to with every minute. And I had no way to know which, except I did have a way. That was the terrible arithmetic that assembled itself in the dark. There was a third road off that mountain, the bad one I'd remembered earlier, the one I'd been saving as my own escape. It wasn't a road at all, really. It was the old fire road, decommissioned 20 years back, grown over and washed out and gated at both ends, with locks so old the district had lost the keys decades ago. It ran along the ridge and connected, at its far southern end, to the South Road, above the South Gate, below the wall, on the safe side. If I could get onto the old fire road, I could reach the South Gate from the uphill side, from my side of the wall, and I could do the one thing that would end the ticking clock permanently. I could get to that gate before Cormac did, and I could make sure it never opened, key or no key. Chain it, block it, disable it. Turn the wall's weak point into just more wall. But to reach the old fire road, I would have to leave the storage room. I would have to go out into a forest full of things that hunted by sound. In the dark, past whatever was still practicing O'Dallas's voice in my office. And I would have to walk the ridge to the one place on the whole mountain closest to where the worst of it was coming up. To save the wall, I'd have to walk toward the flood. And there was one more thing, the thing that made it not a plan, but a decision, the kind that costs. Because if I went and sealed that south gate from the uphill side, I sealed it against Cormac too. If he was alive down there, if he'd realized his mistake, if he was even now turning the van around to come back up the throat of it, toward the only person who might still open a door for him, then me sealing that gate meant he could never come home. I would be doing to him exactly what he'd done to me, locking the door, taking the choice away, deciding he was the name in the crossed-out column. Except when Cormac decided I was expendable, he'd done it to save himself. If I decided he was expendable, I'd be doing it to save everyone the wall protected. Everyone O'Dallas meant when she said you, all of you, everybody that they haven't gotten to yet. The coast, the valley, the nursery where Ilsa used to work. I told myself that made it different. I told myself that all night. I still don't fully know if it does. Do you think it does? I mean that honestly. When someone traps you to save themselves, and then you get the chance to trap them to save others, is that justice? Or is it just the same coin, flipping in the dark? I've never landed on an answer, and I'd trust yours more than mine. I told O'Dallas the plan in the whisper. I heard her not want to say yes. I heard 31 years of dispatch training fight with 63 years of being a person who didn't want to send a man she'd only just met out into that dark. In the end, she said, "The old fire road. There's a spur off the maintenance road behind your water tanks. The gate's chained, but the chain's rusted through in the third link from the post. We flagged it 2 summers ago for repair and never did it. You can pull it by hand. After that, you're on the ridge. Hal." Her whisper broke, just slightly. The things use sound. You go out there, you go out silent, and you stay silent. And whatever you hear out there in a voice you know, it is not a voice you know. Do you understand me? Not your man, not me, not anybody. If you hear me out there, it's them. I understood. God help me, I understood. I waited for the thing in my office to go quiet. It took 2 hours. I don't know if it slept or simply lost interest or moved on to learn some other room. But a little after 2 in the morning, the practicing stopped, and the visitor center on the other side of my steel door went silent. And I made myself wait another full hour on top of that, counting seconds because my father taught me to count things that mattered before I put my hand on the deadbolt. I went out the storage room's back way, a service door that opens onto the wood pile behind the building, not through the office where the thing had been. I went out into fog so thick I could see maybe 15 feet, and cold that got into the wet of my breath, and a dark so complete under those trees that even with the fog I could tell there was no moon reaching the ground. I did not turn on the headlamp. Light is a sound to a thing that hunts by sound, in the sense that it's a signal, a beacon, a way to be found. I went by memory and by the feel of the ground through my boots. 16 years of that ground. And I moved the way I'd learned to move on winter dawn patrols. Heel down soft, rolled to the toe, weight settled before the next step. No rhythm to it, because rhythm is the thing they answer. The maintenance road behind the water tanks was where the van had gone. I found it in the fog by the smell of it first, the hot metal and oil smell of an engine that had run recently. And then by walking into the cold flank of it in the dark, both hands flat on wet, painted steel, before I understood what I was touching. The van, parked at the dead end against the ridge, doors open. And when I felt my way along it to the open side door and reached in, my hand found the seats empty and the floor of it, and something on the floor of it that was a shoe, a woman's shoe, and nothing else. The woman from the van, the one I'd told to lock her doors, the one who'd driven up the wrong way to look for the man who walked out of his jacket. She'd found the dead end, and the fog, and whatever tips its head too far and knocks on air. I did not linger. I found the spur off the maintenance road exactly where Odalis said, and the chained gate, and the third link from the post that came apart in my hands, with a sound like a swallowed cough, too soft, I hoped, to carry. And then I was on the old fire road, on the ridge in the throat of the fog, walking the spine of the mountain toward the south gate and the thing coming up to meet it. The old fire road is a scar. 20 years of no maintenance had let the forest take most of it back. Alder and huckleberry closing over the bed of it, the surface washed into gullies. But the grade was still there under my feet. The unmistakable flatness of something people once cut into a hillside. I followed the flatness. When the brush closed too thick, I felt for the openness of the roadbed with my hands and pushed through. And every branch that dragged across my jacket was a sound. And every sound was a prayer that nothing was close enough to learn it. The knocking found me about a mile along. It started ahead of me and to the left, downhill, from the direction of the south. And it was not one or two now. It was many, a whole slope of the wrong woodpeckers, knocking in the fog. And as I froze in the brush and listened, I understood I was hearing the front edge of the flood, the mass of them coming up the south road in the dark, unhurried, patient, mapping the empty spaces of the mountain one knock at a time. And the empty space they were mapping toward was the south gate, my gate. The one I had to reach first. And then, under the knocking, closer, I heard an engine. A vehicle engine, laboring up a grade in low gear, coming up the south road from below, from the worst of it. Headlights I could see now as a smear of paleness in the fog, far downslope. A van's engine, coming up toward the gate. from the inside. Cormac had turned around. He was alive, and he was scared. And he'd realized that the south road went nowhere good. And he was driving back up the throat of it to the only door he had a key to. And the flood of them was between him and that gate, and so was I. And it was maybe an hour before first light. And after first light, there'd be no one at the bottom to stop what came through behind him. I ran. Silence be damned. I ran, because the arithmetic had run out of time to be quiet in. I ran the old fire road toward the point where it met the south road above the gate. Branches tearing at me, feet finding the grade by luck as much as memory. And the knocking on the slope below turned toward the sound of me and began to move. And Cormac's headlights climbed in the fog. And all three of us, the man and the flood, and me, converged on a locked steel gate in the dark. I reached it first. Barely. The old fire road spilled down onto the south road, maybe 40 feet above the gate, and I came out of the brush and half fell down the embankment onto the road bed. There it was, the south gate, a steel arm across the road, with its padlock hanging from the chain, closed, locked, exactly as Cormac had left it. Below it, downhill, the fog was full of headlights and knocking. Above it, safe, empty road ran back up toward my visitor center and the north road and the coast. The wall. The gate was the wall. And the gate was still shut. Cormac's van stopped on the far side of it, the downhill side, the wrong side, 10 feet below the steel arm. And the headlights lit the fog into a wall of white. And the driver's door opened. And I heard his voice for the first time in weeks. And it was so purely, exhaustedly human, so cracked with terror and relief, that everything I'd built against him all day nearly came apart at the sound of it. "Hal," he said. "Hal, oh my God, is that you? Hal, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. It's so much worse down there. Please, I've got the key. I've got the key right here. Just let me get the gate. Ilsa's in the van. She's sick, Hal. She's really sick, and I've got the medicine, but she needs a hospital. Just let me open the gate, and we'll go together. All of us, right now, please." And I stood on the uphill side of that steel arm with my hand on the padlock. And behind Cormac's van, in the fog, the knocking had stopped. All of it, at once. The way the small birds go silent when everything alive agrees which direction the danger is. And I understood that the flood had reached the van. That it was, right now, in the white fog behind him, learning the sound of his engine and his open door and his voice saying my name. He had the key. If he came around and unlocked the gate, he could get through, and Ilsa could get through, and the medicine could get through, and they might live. And so could everything in the fog behind him, following the open gate up the throat of the wall to the coast. There was no version where the gate opened for only the people I wanted through it. The gate was a wall, or it was nothing. And the man on the far side, the man asking me to let him home, was the same man who'd trapped me to save himself. And now I held his life in exactly the way he'd held mine. And first light was maybe 20 minutes off. And after it, there'd be no one below to stop what his key would let through. "Cormac," I said. My voice came out steadier than I had any right to. "Don't unlock the gate." "What?" A sound in his voice like the floor going out from under him. "Hal, no. You don't understand. We have to. They're right behind me. I can hear them stopping." "Oh God, Hal, they've stopped. Why have they stopped?" "Because they're learning you," I said. "Cormac, listen to me. Listen to my actual voice. If you unlock that gate, everything behind you comes up the mountain, and it doesn't stop at the coast. There is nobody left below to hold the line after sunrise. This gate is the only thing standing between them and everyone who's still alive on this whole coast. You lock this gate, it holds. You open it, it's over. For all of them. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The fog was silent. His headlights burned into it. And in that silence, I heard him understand. Heard the exact moment the arithmetic he'd run all wrong the first time reassembled itself correctly in his head. And it was the worst sound I have ever heard a person make, because it was the sound of a young man realizing that the only right thing left to do was the thing that killed him. "Ilsa's in the van," he said, very quietly, not asking anymore. "I know." "She's pregnant, Hal." "I know, son." The word came out of me before I could stop it. Son. To the man who'd trapped me. "I know." And here is the part I have never told anyone. The part I turn over every single night. The reason I'm telling this whole thing now, into the dark, to whoever's listening. Because I've decided I can't carry the question alone anymore. I had the padlock in my hand. I had the hatchet on my belt. I could have broken that lock. I could have thrown open the gate and let them through, and taken the medicine and the young family and the chance that we'd all make it up the North Road ahead of the fog. I could have decided the coast could hold its own wall somewhere else, that it wasn't mine to hold, that no one had the right to ask one man at one gate to weigh a pregnant woman against 100 miles of people he'd never met. Or I could do what I did. I took the hatchet off my belt, and I did not open the gate. I drove the blade into the exposed threads of the padlock's shackle where it met the body, again and again. Not to break it open, but to ruin it, to jam it, to turn that lock from something a key could ever open again into a fused knot of steel that would hold that gate shut against any key on earth, including the one in Cormac's pocket, including my own. I sealed the wall. I did it while Cormac screamed at me from the far side, and then, when he understood, while Cormac stopped screaming and simply talked to me, low and fast and forgiving in a way I hadn't earned, telling me it was all right, that he understood, that I was right, that he was sorry, that would I tell someone, anyone, that he'd turned around, that at the end he'd turned around and done the right thing, that he wasn't only the man who ran. And behind him, the fog began, softly to knock. I told him I would tell everyone. I told him he'd turned around. I told him it counted, that turning around counted, that I would carry it, and I would say it out loud to whoever would listen for as long as I lived. I am saying it now. Cormac Deschler turned his van around in the worst place on earth and drove back up the throat of it, not to escape, but because he'd realized he'd chosen wrong. And at the very end, at a locked gate in the fog, when he understood what opening it would cost, he chose not to open it. He let the wall hold. He let me ruin the lock. A frightened boy who robbed me in the dark became, at the last, the man who held the line. And the difference between those two people is the only thing about that whole day I still believe in. The knocking rose behind his headlights. I did not stay to hear it finish. I climbed back up the embankment onto the old fire road, and I did not turn on my light. And I went silent up the ridge toward the North Road and the coast. And I did not look back, because looking back is a movement, and movement is a sound. And there was nothing I could do for him that ruining that lock hadn't already done, for good and for terrible. I made it to the coast highway a little after dawn. The fog thinned as the road dropped toward the sea, the way it always does. And I walked out of the trees onto pavement I'd driven 10,000 times. and there was a county truck parked sideways across both lanes with two exhausted people beside it who nearly shot me before they understood I was a person. One of them, when I said my name, put her hand over her mouth, and I knew before she said it that it was Odalis, that she'd left her dispatch chair when the frequency went quiet and driven up as far as the line to wait, because she'd decided one of us should be a real person to the other before the end. And she hadn't been able to bear it being only a voice. The south gate held. That's the thing I hold on to. Whatever came up the south road that morning met a fused lock and a steel arm and no key on earth that would open it. And it did not reach the coast that day. And the line the county drew moved down off my mountain to the sea and held there long enough for the people who plan these things to plan better ones. My mountain became the wall it was always meant to be, and the weak point in the wall stayed shut, because a scared young man turned his van around and let me ruin the lock. I still work the coast, not the visitor center. That grove is inside the line now, closed. The trails shut for good. The trees standing in fog with their bases wide enough to hide anything, knocking to each other in a language we handed them one sound at a time. I work a station further down, and I keep a radio on. And every so often, on a dead channel, I hear a knock. 3 even raps, patient. The sound a thing makes when it wants a scared man to open a door. And I do not open the door. I've told you everything except the question, and the question is the reason I told you any of it. Cormac trapped me to save himself, and then I trapped him to save others, and he forgave me for it before the fog took him. And I have never once been able to decide whether that forgiveness was a gift or the cruelest thing he could have done, because it means I have to believe I was right. And believing I was right means believing that the correct thing to do with a man who turns around at the last moment and chooses to hold the line is to leave him on the wrong side of it. So tell me, you've heard all of it now, the key and the note and the ruined lock and the boy who came back. If it had been your hand on that padlock, 20 minutes before first light, with 100 miles of strangers on one side and a young family and a man's forgiveness on the other, what would you have done? Would you have opened the gate? I've asked myself every night for a long time, and the honest truth is, I still don't know if I saved the coast or just decided, the way Cormac once decided about me, that some people are the name you cross out. Tell me what you'd have done. I'll read every answer. It's the closest thing to absolution I've got left.